Begin with a question. Remember when Michael Sam was supposed to be a distraction? The crisis deepens in the NFL, the National Freefall League. Roger Goodell, proprietor. The Minnesota Vikings have today inexplicably reinstated a player who admits to hitting his 4-year-old son's scrotum with a small tree branch, publicly saying, in the words of General Manager Rick Spielman, quote, "This is disciplining a child." And because Adrian Peterson says he's sorry and he'll think about not doing it again, the Vikings, under the delusion that all of this will somehow pass by the time Peterson takes the field next Sunday in New Orleans, and I will not argue with you if you think Vikings management is palpably insane. Meanwhile, it is not yet official, but every indication is that Ray Rice, who has apparently only beaten an adult, will file an appeal of his suspension before tomorrow's deadline, and that his union will support him, and that the horrible optics about this for the NFL will double once he does so. Because Ray Rice was utterly wrong to hit his fiancée. He was utterly wrong in 1,000 ways. But he is not wrong about the fact that Roger Goodell looked at all of that, didn't see the tape and made up his mind anyway, or did see the tape and made up his mind anyway and lied about it, and used his best judgment, that is, no judgment whatsoever, and suspended Ray Rice for 2 games, and then went back and suspended Ray Rice again for the same act. And double jeopardy in any form is prohibited under the laws of this country, and apparently under those of the NFL collective bargaining agreement. You cannot sentence a man for a crime, then go back later and say, hey, that was not enough, here's more punishment. Ray Rice was not any more guilty last Monday than he'd been on July 24th when he was suspended the first time. In the interim, he didn't go back in time to February 15th and hit her again. Ray Rice's second suspension punishes him for Roger Goodell screwing up. The law of unintended consequences applies too. Not only was the Rice punch scandal followed by the Rice suspension outrage scandal, but then the Rice suspension outrage scandal was followed by the Rice video revelation scandal, and then the Rice video revelation scandal was followed by the Rice video shipment scandal, and now it will in turn be followed by the Rice suspension reinstatement scandal. Because thanks entirely to Roger Goodell, a wife beater who initially got away with it with a token punishment, he now has the moral high ground on the subject of appealing his second suspension. And it gets worse. Of course it does. This is the National Freefall League. Until this morning, the disturbing picture of having to support Ray Rice's suspension appeal was mitigated by the reality that it was all academic, that no matter how long or short Rice's second indefinite suspension will turn out to be, what matters was the Ravens terminating his contract. Suspended, not suspended, reinstated, it's irrelevant. No NFL team will touch Ray Rice for a long time, if ever. Or so I thought, until the Vikings went from the most morally proactive position about Adrian Peterson to the least. You cannot withhold a man's salary because he's merely accused of a crime, but you sure as hell can keep him out of your office, out of your business, out of your uniform, off your team. Until you decide that 1 week of that is enough and you really can't afford to pay Peterson another $691,000 a week while your team loses by 23 points again. And anyway, what the hell? Your fans seem largely to support him, no matter what he admits to doing to a 4-year-old boy, so why not? 7 months after his 2-year-old son was killed by child abuse, allegedly part of supposed disciplining by the boyfriend of his child's mother, Adrian Peterson, as part of supposed disciplining, himself abused his 4-year-old son. The police report says Peterson repeatedly hit the boy with a switch, which is a pleasant euphemism for a small tree branch. The 4-year-old had cuts and bruises on his back, his legs, his ankles, his buttocks, and his scrotum. And he had defensive wounds on his hands. The little boy was putting up his hands, trying to stop a professional football player from hitting him with a small tree branch. The 4-year-old also says Daddy Peterson stuffed leaves in his mouth while he whooped him and hit him on his face, and the kid said he was afraid if he told that Daddy Peterson would then punch him in the face. There are lots of belts in Daddy's closet, the police report quotes the child as saying. Peterson, quote, likes belts and switches. He has a whooping room. Oh, it's regional and cultural, say Adrian Peterson's pathetic apologists like Tony Dungy, who insisted Michael Sam was a distraction, but who now demands we withhold judgment on Peterson because it remains to be seen if bloodying a 4-year-old's scrotum is really abuse. Or Charles Barkley, who repeated today that if what Peterson did was a crime, every black family in the South should be in jail. Your idea, Chuck, not mine. But regional and cultural. Truly. That's exactly the way other Americans used to defend having 8-year-old boys working coal mines 6 days a week, or how people in the South used to defend slavery and Jim Crow and segregation and lynching. In essence, Adrian Peterson denies none of this. He appears confident he is in the right. That's the way he was brought up, and there's nothing wrong with him other than the fact that he beats a child with a stick. Peterson texted the boy's mother after he beat their son. He guessed she would be, quote, mad at me about his leg. I got kind of good with the tail end of the switch. Felt bad after the fact when I noticed the switch was wrapping around hitting his thigh. Got him in nuts once, I noticed, but I felt so bad I'm all tearing that butt up when needed. I start putting them in timeout and save the whooping for needed memories. The little boy was putting up his hands trying to stop a professional football player from hitting him with a small tree branch. When Peterson was indicted for this, the Vikings not only got it right, they got it right almost immediately. The league could not act immediately against Peterson. His inhumanity towards a toddler is not Roger Goodell's fault, except in the broadest of senses, so the Vikings acted. And then they immediately went back to the NFL default position. Hey, it's not our problem. To be clear, says their statement today, we take very seriously any matter that involves the welfare of a child. Well, no, you don't. You did, but now clearly you don't. At this time, however, we believe this is a matter of due process, and we should allow the legal system to proceed so we can come to the most effective conclusions and then determine the appropriate course of action. Next year sometime. Next year. The Vikings believe Adrian Peterson will play the remaining 14 games of this season. They are not saying this, but it is easily inferred because Peterson's lawyer has already put in for a postponement on the first hearing, and even before that, the district attorney of Montgomery County, Texas, said he assumes Peterson's first court appearance would be in a couple of weeks, and that if there is a trial, it would begin sometime next year. See, we can't suspend our superstar player because his case is still being adjudicated, and it would be unfair to our team and our fans and to the justice system and the flag and the founding fathers just to sit him out and pay him like we did yesterday, even though that's exactly what we did to that other guy? Huh? The other guy's name was Chris Cook, and he was a Minnesota Vikings player too, a quarterback, and he was arrested early in the 2011 season for allegedly assaulting his girlfriend. The Vikings, showing moral force in an era of buck passing, suspended Cook for the next game but knew they could not continue to take his paycheck away from him, so they simply listed him as inactive for the game after that, just like Peterson. But unlike Peterson, the Vikings did not rush to welcome Cook back. They listed him as inactive for the next game too, and the next one after that, and after that, for 10 weeks. Cook was eventually acquitted. He returned to the team the next year. He had been paid, yet he had still been punished. So when the Vikings imply there's nothing they can do but allow the legal system to proceed, they, owners Ziggy and Mark Wilf and general manager Rick Spielman, are lying, contradicted by their own actions from 3 years ago. Which brings us back to Roger Goodell. The National Free Fall League is in crisis. The horrible actions of Ray Rice have been surpassed by the more horrible actions of Adrian Peterson. Greg Hardy has been convicted of domestic abuse, was benched yesterday, but his team seems ready to reinstate him, and Ray McDonald is still facing charges and still playing. One team has an overtly racist name. There was a bullying scandal last season. There remains a concussion plague. The crisis is so bad that a poll taken by an outfit widely viewed as being politically conservative asked if the league has a, quote, widespread epidemic, unquote, of domestic abuse. 69% of all Americans said yes. What about NFL fans? More. 70% said yes. Women, 73% said yes. The commissioner should resign, 50-50. Some of the polling was done before the Adrian Peterson story came out. The NFL is in crisis. What can anybody do about it? Well, Roger Goodell is still commissioner. If he wants things to change, if he wants to keep his job, if he wants to suggest there is any moral force left in professional football, he should invoke both Adrian Peterson's little boy and the disciplinary powers he has and say, Adrian Peterson is suspended without pay until further notice. If he doesn't like it, he can sue me. We will not defend a man who admits he beats a 4-year-old boy with a stick. That's what he should do. The other option right now for him is pretty much just fold the league, get out of business. The little boy was putting up his hands, trying to stop a professional football player from hitting him with a small tree branch. Watch that player lead the Minnesota Vikings as they take on the Saints next over most of these stations.